After leaving the shopping mall, I went back to the office. Lunch break ended like any other day. The spreadsheets I had left unfinished were open again, and a few emails were still waiting for replies. The rest of the afternoon passed between familiar tasks. Near the end of the day, I checked the time, cleared my desk, and left the office. I had been meaning to get a haircut for the past few days, but each time, I put it off until another day. It was still early today, so on the way home, I stopped by the barbershop I usually went to. It wasn't crowded. One customer was almost finished, and 2 chairs farther inside were empty. The barber recognized me and asked if I wanted the same haircut as last time. I nodded, placed my phone on the small shelf in front of me, and let him wrap the cape around my neck. The clippers had only been running for a little while when my phone vibrated. The screen lit up right in front of me. A new notification had appeared about the company whose stock I own. I looked at it for a few seconds, then asked the barber to wait a moment and reach for my phone. The information wasn't long. I read it from beginning to end, scrolled back up to read one part again, then put the phone down. Nothing in it said the stock would fall tomorrow. There was no number telling me how the market would react either. Today's trading session was already over, and the closing price was still exactly where it had been. The barber continued cutting my hair. As I looked at myself in the mirror, tomorrow morning's trading session began to take shape in my mind. If this news made enough people worried, selling pressure could appear as soon as the market opened. The price might open below today's close, and if buyers were weak, that initial drop could cause even more people to sell. If that happened, I should sell early. But as soon as that thought appeared, another possibility immediately came in. I had seen sessions where the price dropped sharply at the beginning, then recovered very quickly. If tomorrow turned out the same way, selling some of the shares I had bought earlier right after the market opened might leave me watching the price recover just after I had sold. The scissors moved close to my ear. The barber asked if I wanted the front a little shorter. I looked at him through the mirror and only realized after a few seconds that he was waiting for my answer. I told him to leave it the same as before. My phone was still lying quietly on the shelf. There were no new notifications. But tomorrow's trading session was no longer standing still. If the stock opened lower and I sold, the price might recover immediately afterward. If I didn't sell, it might keep falling. I started calculating how much money would change if the stock lost another few percent. Then from that level, I began thinking about an even lower one. The barber turned the chair slightly to one side. Outside the glass door, traffic continued moving as usual. Someone stopped in front of the shop, walked in, and asked how long the wait would be. The other barber said about 20 minutes. I heard the answer clearly. But as soon as my eyes returned to the phone in front of me, my thoughts immediately went back to tomorrow's trading session. What if I sold only part of my position? The shares I had bought earlier could be sold, but the shares I had just added were not yet available to sell. If the market reacted strongly, I would have to sit there watching those shares move without being able to do anything about them. I wanted to pick up my phone and read the information again, but both of my hands were still under the barber cape. Maybe I was thinking too far ahead. Tomorrow, the market might not react much at all. That thought eased some of the tension in my body, but then an old trading session came back to me. That one had also started with a piece of news I didn't think was too serious. That the next morning, the stock opened much lower than I had expected. As soon as the barber turned off the clippers and reached for the small mirror, I picked up my phone. I opened another article, then went down to the comments below it. The first person said the news was nothing to worry about. After reading that, I felt a little better. The next person analyzed it in the opposite direction, and the feeling that had just eased immediately returned. I kept scrolling. Someone said we should wait for an official statement from the company. Someone else said the market often overreacted to news like this. One opinion made me want to hold. The next made me think about selling. The more I read, the harder it became to tell whether I was looking for more information or simply looking for something strong enough to make me feel reassured. "Done, sir." I looked up. The barber was standing behind me, holding the small mirror. He turned it so I could see the back of my hair. I looked from side to side, nodded, and stood up. He brushed the small pieces of hair from my shoulders. I paid and walked outside. It was darker than when I had gone in. Standing beside my motorbike, I looked at my phone one more time before putting it away. The original article still contained exactly the same words. The market had not reopened. The stock price had not changed, and I had not lost another cent from my account. But during the time I had been sitting in that chair, I had imagined myself selling the stock several times, holding it several times, watching the price fall, watching it recover, calculating how much money I might lose, and even imagining the regret I might feel if I made the wrong decision. On the way home, I slowed down at an intersection when I noticed the road leading toward a nearby temple. After an afternoon in which my mind had kept running from one possibility to another, I just wanted to find somewhere quiet for a while. So I changed direction. The temple gate was still open. I walked slowly through the courtyard. I could still hear traffic from the road outside, but it was quieter here. A few people were walking around ahead of me. Someone lit incense and then left. I didn't go into the main hall. Instead, I sat down on a stone bench beneath a tree in the courtyard beside it. My phone was still in my pocket. The thoughts about tomorrow's trading session had not completely disappeared, but in the quiet of the courtyard, they were no longer rushing one after another the way they had in the barbershop. I looked at the trees in front of me, listened to the leaves moving against each other in the wind, leaned back gently against the bench. In one corner of the courtyard, a young monk was sweeping dry leaves into a pile. A gust of wind passed through and sent a few of the leaves he had just gathered rolling away. He waited for the wind to pass, then continued sweeping. I watched him for a while, then turned my eyes back toward the courtyard in front of me. There was no price board, no more analysis to read, and nothing I needed to decide right now. Tomorrow's trade session had not even begun. I was simply sitting there, listening to the quiet sounds around the courtyard and feeling a sense of stillness I had barely experienced since the moment I read that news. A sudden sound came from somewhere nearby. Almost immediately, my hand went into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Only when the screen was in front of me did I realize there was no call, no notification. The sound I had just heard hadn't even come from my phone. I looked at the screen for a few seconds, then turned it off. I put the phone back into my pocket, but what I had just done stayed in my attention. I wasn't waiting for a call. There wasn't a message I needed to reply to. And yet, all it took was a sound somewhere nearby, and I had pulled out my phone almost without thinking. I sat still again. Every now and then, I could hear the young monk's broom in the distance. The wind was still moving through the trees. Nothing in the courtyard in front of me had changed. The quiet feeling from a moment ago slowly returned. But what I had just done remained in my mind. If I hadn't been so concerned about the news on my phone, would I have reached for it that quickly?